Alright everybody, in this screencast I'm going to talk to you about DNA structure. Now this is really important for us to learn because this helps us understand everything that comes after. So when we want to understand how DNA replicates to make copies of itself, or we want to understand how DNA sends a message out of the nucleus out to the cell, or how we take that message and we make that into a protein, we really need to understand how DNA is put together. So we're going to start with DNA structure, and there's three main things that make up DNA. We have a sugar, also known as a deoxyribose sugar. Can't write the best on this. We have a phosphate group, or we're just going to call it an acid, but I want you to know that that is the phosphate. So I'll write that there. And then we have a base. And there's three types of bases, or four types of bases, or actually five types of bases. We'll get into that a little bit later. This is the main components of DNA structure. Alright, so if I go to the next slide, look at what that looks like. What does DNA structure look like when we start to put it all together? So I'm going to start by drawing this little drawing here. And this right here is going to look much like something you're going to cut out and use as a model in a lab later on. This is our sugar. So we have our sugar molecule. And then sitting on top of the sugar we have a phosphate. So this is our acid. Now, if I were to draw DNA here like this, alright, so here's my DNA and here's my ladder rungs of my DNA, because DNA is what is known as a double helix. Right? So it's a twisted ladder. Some people call it a twisted ladder. We call it a double helix in biology. And a lot of times when we talk about the DNA molecule, we're not going to look at a double helix. We're going to unravel it and just look at it like a ladder. And if I were to look at it just as a ladder from here to like here, this upright part, the upright part of the ladder right here, this is what this acid and base are. Or the sugar and acid are, I'm sorry. And then coming off of each sugar we have something like this, and this is where the base is. And the base actually makes up each one of these little upright rung things. So I have an acid, a sugar, and a base. This makes up our nucleotide. And you can imagine what happens here, right? Like there's going to be another sugar attached right here. Right? There's going to be another base right here. There's going to be another acid right here, and you can start to see the right or the left hand side of my ladder forming. Imagine if I drew this on the other side. In fact, let's just do it real quick, what I'm talking about. So I have another slide here, and I'm going to draw it just a little more primitive even, so I can do it quick for you. But here's my sugar, right? So here's my sugar, here's my acid. Then sitting on top of that is another sugar and another acid, and sitting on top of that's another sugar and another acid, and coming off of each one of these is some kind of base. And we'll talk more about that later, what that looks like. So you see I have half a ladder. Well, think about if I could copy this and flip it over, or just draw it real quick, I would have another sugar with an acid sitting on it, another sugar with an acid sitting on top of that, and then another sugar over here with an acid sitting on top of that. And you're going to actually build something that looks like this, and then there'll be bases connected to each one of those sugars. And all of a sudden what I have is the beginning of a ladder. Now if I put millions of these on top of each other, you can see how this turns into a long strand of DNA. Then I twist it, and I have my twisted ladder. Now there's four types. In DNA, there's four bases. So I'm going to just write them right here. Four bases in DNA. There is adenine, which is ADENINE, guanine, thymine, thanks for bearing with me on that, and cytosine. So here are my four different bases. And what I'm going to do is just go back over there. Check this out. A, G, right, T, and C. So these four bases are what it's actually over here on my DNA molecule. And what was really interesting is we have equal amounts of some of the bases in DNA because one base always bonds to another base. So really, what we learned in the video earlier is that we watched earlier is that A always goes with T, and C always goes with G. So if I came over here and just said like A, T, and C, you would know that the other side, A always goes with T, that this is a T, this is an A, and C always goes with G. That's a G. And that's really all there is to this idea of DNA structure. All right, so let's just kind of recap it here real quick. If I go another slide, what do we have? We have three main parts. So I'm going to write three main parts. And what are they? They're the sugar, acid, and base, right? And we know that DNA is made up of nucleotides, which are a sugar, acid, and base. And if we were to do like a kind of quick drawing again of that, we would have our sugar, we put base on top of that, or an acid on top of that, forgive me, acid, and then a base. And that is our nucleotide. We know that A always goes with T, we know that C always goes with G, and these are our four bases. And then we know that these things, our nucleotides kind of bond together. The acids bond to the bottom of the sugar, the bases bond with each other, and they form this kind of twisted ladder thing that makes up deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. This is DNA structure. That's what you need to know to get to the next part.